For me, no ideological or political convictions would justify the sacrifice of a human life. For me, the value of life is absolute, with no concessions. It's not negotiable. Edgar Ramirez. Good day, and you're listening to Cult Life with me, Robin Jackson. I was born in a little town on the southeast coast of South Africa. I befriended a little boy before we went to primary school, or what my American listeners would probably term grade school. Our parents were friends and became Jehovah's Witnesses. My dad took to the witnesses, but my mother never really did. On the first day of grade 1, I was the only boy he recognized as he walked into the classroom. He said it was my big red tie that caught his eye and caught his attention, and it made him feel comfortable, knowing that he had a friend in the very same class. We were together in the same class up until high school, but he became withdrawn, secluded, and distant one day. And this lasted almost a year. I tried to get him to talk, open up, and to tell me what he was going through at the time, but he wouldn't. Some of my other friends tried to do the same, but he was closed. His mom approached me one day and took me aside and asked me to be supportive of him, and because she noticed he was a bit depressed and changed, and she was concerned about this. I did my best to be there and to support him. You see, this boy and his family had lost their father to the Watchtower's no blood transfusion policy that robbed them of a father, a breadwinner, and a friend. He never stayed a witness, was never baptized, and saw very early on that it was one big money-making racket. He told me later on that the sales model that he saw that the Watchtower used was a perfect sales model to maximize the profits. Get a massive sales force to distribute and sell your literature for free, and gain on the profits. This to him was a publishing company masquerading as a religion. As you could gather, today's show is all about blood, sacrifice, ethics, and Jehovah's Witnesses. And we'll talk about some instances in South Africa over the past years. In February 2009, the Johannesburg High Court ordered doctors to go ahead and give a 12-year-old girl a life-saving blood transfusion. The girl was suffering from leukemia, and the South African Human Rights Commission chairperson said that in such cases the right to life took precedence over the right to religion. In November of the very same year, the Pietermaritzburg High Court granted an urgent order authorizing a blood transfusion for a 4-day-old baby boy who was born 15 weeks premature. His Jehovah's Witness parents refused to give consent for a life-saving blood transfusion. In Durban, the city where I live at the moment, in 2014, the Durban High Court granted a doctor permission to give a 10-year-old Jehovah's Witness girl a blood transfusion. The girl was suffering from a life-threatening autoimmune disease, and she had a bleeding disorder. And under the SA Constitution, South African Constitution, every right is limited. But children's rights are not limited. The children's interest is of paramount and of utmost importance. The South African Constitution in Section 70 of the Children's Act says that a parent, guardian or a caregiver may not resist assisting a child or withholding consent on the sole grounds of religious or other beliefs. And of course I suspect that many other countries have similar clauses in their constitutions or in their laws to protect children. For those who are listening, who are not Jehovah's Witnesses, a bit of background. Jehovah's Witnesses refuse blood transfusions because they believe that it is against God's will. And they base this on a Bible scripture, well, a few Bible scriptures, and the one is in Acts 15:28, verse 29, and then Leviticus 17, verse 10, and we're not going to go into the detail. And these scriptures states that humans should abstain from blood. But all these issues surrounding Jehovah's Witnesses and the refusing of blood transfusions leaves the medical fraternity with an ethical dilemma. Although the Watchtower Society teaches that the biblical command concerning blood consumption applies to transfusions of whole blood, certain blood fractions and components are acceptable. And I want to dwell on this a little bit. You see, the Jehovah's Witnesses have had a doctrinal or dogmatic flip-flop when it comes to the blood issue. And you'll notice that in its history, there have been a lot of doctrinal flip-flops when it comes to their teachings and what they stand for. And it's well documented. But let's look at Jehovah's Witnesses' stance on the position on blood. In a nutshell, whole blood and its components are not acceptable for transfusion into a Jehovah's Witness. So Jehovah's Witnesses are encouraged not to accept whole blood when it comes to blood transfusions. And that includes its components, its red cells, its white cells, plasma, and platelets. However, the derivatives of those components, the fractions of those components, are acceptable and is a matter of personal decision. So red cell fractions, white cell fractions, plasma fractions, platelet fractions are all acceptable or a matter of personal decision. So hemoglobin-based blood substitutes are a matter of personal decision. Albumin, clotting factors, and the wound healing factors of platelets are all acceptable. So you can Google it. It's well documented on some of the websites, JW Facts and the Associating Witnesses for Reform and Blood on their website as well. So Google it. You can find a lot of information there. So here's the question. Those fractions that you say, Watchtower, are acceptable or is a matter of personal choice, where do you think they are derived from? Just something to ponder on to the listeners as well. Whole blood is not acceptable, but certain components of blood are acceptable. So what the Watchtower in effect is actually telling its members is you cannot eat the whole hamburger, but you are allowed to eat the hamburger patty, the lettuce, the tomato, the slice of cheese separately. Therefore, in my opinion, the Jehovah's Witness policy on blood is very much irrational. And this is backed up by their changing views, as I've said before, and their flip-flops on the matter over the years. In addition, many medical practitioners have reported that in their experience, some Jehovah's Witnesses patients may actually wish to consent to receiving blood transfusions, but are reluctant to agree to it for fear of being ostracized or disfellowshipped or excommunicated. And I think that's a matter of it's a crisis of conscience that probably many of Jehovah's Witness patients who are faced with this dilemma have to grapple with when it comes to this. And a case in point is the report from Ghana, an African country, where a woman who was a Jehovah's Witness died during childbirth due to excessive blood loss. And she had accepted a blood transfusion in the past, but was excommunicated or disfellowshipped for doing so in the past. So her refusal for doing so was for not accepting a blood transfusion this time round was because of fear of being excommunicated again or disfellowshipped. So the Watchtower presents difficulties to its members to exercise free choice when it comes to this issue. And in my view, many of the patients are coerced, and coercion and pressure is put on the members in these situations. We all know that the hospital liaison committee members, which are basically made up of elders in the congregation, are quick to coerce patients into refusing a potentially life-saving blood transfusion. And in my opinion, just the mere fact that these members are present at the hospital when these issues are being dealt with can be very intimidating for Jehovah's Witness patients, because the very real threat of being disfellowshipped or shunned is always there. So the flip-flop on what's acceptable and what is not is a dangerous one with regard to this issue. The South African Medical Journal published an article relating to hemopure and hemoglobin when it comes to the issue of blood transfusion. And as recently as, back in 1998, two officials from the Watchtower Society's Hospital Information Service wrote that Jehovah's Witnesses do not accept hemoglobin, which is a major part of red blood cells. Jehovah's Witnesses do not accept a blood substitute which uses hemoglobin taken from a human or animal source. But the policy on accepting hemoglobin and other blood fractions has changed according to the June the 15th, 2000 issue of the Watchtower. And these changes, and I can tell you what, that many of the Jehovah's Witness rank and file are very much confused when it comes to what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. It creates a lot of confusion under the Jehovah's Witnesses and so forth. So numerous witnesses have started to question the logic of these inconsistent dogma that the Watchtower peddles when it comes to the blood transfusion issue. And it does cause a lot of stress and problems associated with the whole doctrine and the whole blood dogma surrounding it. And that's one of the main reasons why, Jehovah's Witnesses are always in the news when it comes to the issue of blood transfusion. So apart from the child abuse cases, the next thing that's always that they're associated with is their stance on blood transfusions. So in my opinion, the logic that Watchtower Society employs here is just mind-blowing. And they are continually playing into with people's lives. And this is just terrible. The Watchtower Society is in a catch-22 situation here. They know it. If the ban on blood transfusion is lifted, this would open up a vast can of worms. That would open them up to lawsuits, and it would open them up. There could be a mass exodus out of the witnesses, out of the Watchtower organization. In the meantime, witnesses have to grapple with this whole situation. And this also brings me to the whole deception on the part of the Watchtower organization. And when I speak about deception, I'm talking about when Jehovah's Witnesses go out and recruit, go from house to house, from door to door, they do not tell you beforehand, the householder or the potential recruit, that you would have to abstain from any life-saving blood transfusions. You would have to allow your child to die and refuse a life-saving blood transfusion. And this is a trait of a cult, because cults need to operate and recruit using deception. And the reason for this is if people knew beforehand what their true practices are, they would not join. They hide the truth from you until they think you are ready to accept it. And from my experience as a Jehovah's Witness, when you first start studying or recruiting potential new recruits into the organization, nowhere is there ever mention of the whole blood issue, as far as I can recall, in the Watchtower literature that you study with the householders. If the householder knew beforehand, they would possibly run a mile. Imagine if the leader of Heaven's Gate cult was open and dishonest about the group. Was open and honest about the group. Telling them that outright that by joining the cult you would have to wear strange clothes, get castrated and drink poison. I doubt whether he would have had any takers. So the whole blood issue surrounding Jehovah's Witnesses is an issue that is not told beforehand to potential recruits. The issue of the paradise earth, and when you study, you are made to study books that portray life in a paradise earth, where there will be peace and security and no wars and all this. But nowhere is there ever mentioned of the whole blood issue. The issue of fear is also very real when it comes to the blood question. The society requires members to sign what they call a medical directive annually, which Jehovah's Witnesses members are required to carry. It's a no blood directive. But it's been found that many Jehovah's Witnesses do not update this information. This is normally handed out at the meetings where everybody's present, where the members of the congregation are present. And it's in this environment, it actually it doesn't. Members of the organization or the congregation don't actually have a choice when it comes to filling in this blood no blood medical directive card. Many Jehovah's Witnesses have neither accurate information regarding blood transfusion, the safety thereof, the choices they have, the freedom to sign or not to sign without repercussion, nor the encouragement to obtain any independent legal advice when it comes to the blood issue. The society or the organization polices compliance in most instances. So the freedom to make an independent legal decision when it comes to blood transfusions is compromised when a person in authority is present. And I've said so before that the medical hospital liaison committee that the Jehovah's Witnesses normally appoint in matters of blood when it comes to Jehovah's Witnesses patients can be very intimidating for some. So this document that the Jehovah's Witnesses are required to fill in and to carry on them is the question of its legality is highly questionable too. So it's a huge issue. So the fear, the fact that the fear effect or the fear tactic, it's very real. The fear of losing family members, and it's a double-edged sword, because patients, on the one hand, are stuck with the dilemma of, if I take the blood transfusion, I will be excommunicated, I will be disfellowshipped. If I do not, I stand the risk of dying. So it's a double-edged sword. And Jehovah's Witness patients have no freedom to make that choice without coercion or intimidation in many instances. Thankfully, in many countries, the authorities normally step in when it comes to children and the question of blood transfusion. And many children's lives have been saved by the authorities. However, as I said, in the meantime, fathers, mothers, children, grandfathers, grandmothers are continually being sacrificed on the altar of the Watchtower organization. So Watchtower, how are you any different from Jim Jones, who coerced 930 members of his People's Temple Church to drink a cyanide-laced drink and to commit suicide? In my opinion, the Jehovah's Witness body count, or the Watchtower's body count, is way more than that. Until next time, this is Robin Jackson. Thank you for listening.